Welcome to my 2025 life and business review. This will be my fourth annual review video that I started all the way back in 2022 as a way to document every year of my life. So one day when I'm 85 years old, I can look back and recognize all the different parts of the journey. And hopefully I can share some lessons and takeaways that will impact your life positively by the end of this video. So this video is going to have 4 sections: my life recap, life lessons, business recap, business lessons. If you're only interested in certain parts of that, you can find the timestamps to each section in the description below. Each big section will be timestamped and each individual lesson and bullet will be timestamped. You can also find this in podcast form if you want to learn on the go. That'll be linked below. And you can also find it in written form if you prefer to read along. So without further ado, grab a cup of coffee, grab a notebook if you want to take some notes. I appreciate you tuning into this long video. Let's reflect on the last 12 months because 2025 was a hell of a year. All right, starting with the life recap in bullets, let's start with a little bit of context on how I do these reviews. So during the second week of December, I headed off to Costa Rica for 9 days completely off the grid. This is phone on airplane mode, no work computer, no Slack, no distractions, just these physical journals, nature, surfing, lifting, espresso. The goal being to zoom out completely from the day-to-day of how I'm currently operating, switch up the environment, and reflect on everything that happened. So my process is to read through all of my journals from the year and all of my recaps, my monthly reviews, weekly reviews, all that, to kind of reassess what happened and then distill all of that into a list of bullets that summarizes the year. So my goal when I'm 85 years old is that I can zoom in on any individual year and say, what happened in 2025? What happened in 2030? Okay, there's the list. Here's what happened. Here's what I learned. And then if I want to go deeper, I can watch the video or watch the newsletter. So that list of bullets is the outline for this video and the newsletter that I write that kind of summarizes my year. And this video is me going deeper on each of them. So I could easily just list off what happened and list off what I learned. But I think having added context is useful both for me to actually crystallize what I'm learning here, and then also to share for future me who wants a little bit deeper and richer of a perspective. And then lastly, I hope it's just useful for anyone who watches, where you can kind of either follow my journey or follow the last couple of years of the journey and learn from some of the painful mistakes and things that I've had going on. So that's basically the overview of what we're going to get into. I'm going to do this in a couple sections. I'm going to start with the life bullets, then we'll do life, what I learned, then we'll do business bullets and business, what I learned. So without further ado, let's get right into the first life bullet of the year. All right, the first bullet of the year is that I started the year on a South American slowmad adventure and then quickly realized that was not for me. So this year I began in Mexico City after moving out of the mansion that I rented in Arizona. For anyone who watched my end of year video last year, that's where I filmed it. And I pulled that up before this and I look far more run down than I do right now. So that's the first win of the year, is that in making my yearly review, I look a little bit more energized, a little bit more life behind my eyes. And that feeling I had at the end of last year definitely bled into the start of the year. So we went to Mexico City. I say we, and I'll reference we throughout this. That'll be me and my girlfriend, Sammy, and she'll be referenced throughout the video. But we moved to an Airbnb in Mexico City, which was, for all intents and purposes, very cool. It had a sauna in it. It was beautifully just decorated. It was in a pretty solid area, walkable to a lot of things. I was very excited when I got there, though I was feeling the end of the year still, and I didn't quite get the rest and recovery that I needed at the end of 2024 heading into 25. So anyway, we got to Mexico City and it was pretty good. There was awesome food, awesome coffee, good lifestyle, tons of dogs. And the first week or two, I was pretty excited to be there. But about 3 weeks in, something felt off. And I don't want to make this a big deep dive into Mexico City, but basically all the good things are good, but a couple of them, specifically the air quality, makes it very hard to breathe. I found that after a couple of weeks, I'd go outside and I just wasn't taking deep breaths. And you take a deep breath and you're like, something's off with the air quality there. Our apartment didn't have AC. It would get super stuffy. We lived next to a bar that would blare music. The power would go out. A lot of these things made me realize that this was not where I wanted to be long-term. I got a bunch of stomach issues, integrating socially, not easy. So anyway, all of that on top of getting off to a slow start in the year, on the business front. And I'm sitting there in February and it's not going to plan. So the year kind of started off on rocky footing, and it hit me that this was not the lifestyle that I wanted, and I knew some changes needed to be made. However, this was the end of February, early March. We had a 2-week trip to Patagonia already planned, so all the way down in Argentina, and that was going to be part of our South American adventure. So I wasn't going to cancel that trip because it's already paid for, and so I kind of knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel, and that the travel and slow madding was going to come to an end, but I still had 4 or 5 weeks of it. So from there, after Mexico City, we flew down to Buenos Aires, and Buenos Aires was just not it. I was already very run down from trying to integrate into Mexico City, but Buenos Aires was 10 times harder. Now, if I went there fully refreshed and energized, like maybe I would have liked it more, but it was a 9-hour flight away. The Spanish was extremely hard to understand. Our credit cards just did not work at all. There was no fresh vegetables seemingly in the entire country. It was not anywhere near as dog friendly as Mexico City. So all of that, right when we got there, we realized it. And it kind of hit me that we were stuck for a couple weeks before Patagonia. And then we would do the Patagonia trip. And from there, I would kind of claw my way out of this South American slow mad adventure. Anyway, Patagonia was incredible. This was a 2-week trip, one of the most spectacular hiking trips you could possibly imagine. I flew my best friend Fletcher out there to shoot videos of the entire thing. We got a lot of cool content. We hiked some of the most incredible mountains. It was, for all intents and purposes, a dream hiking and exploring adventure. But I'd be lying if I said I was fully engaged on that trip because I limped into it energetically because of the prior 4 months. If I had, like I said, gone in on solid footing, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but I was just run down. I had come to the conclusion that traveling to new cities and trying to work and trying to integrate and trying to reestablish routines was not going to be for me. And it felt like I had this massive debt to repay of borrowed time and energy from all my prior travels. So basically, all the traveling I did in 2024 and the slow mad adventure that I started in 2025, you don't just end those things and then reintegrate into kind of a more stable lifestyle and routine. You are borrowing from that future stability and you have to claw your way all the way back out of it. So that's what I had to do. It kind of hit me. When I was there, I pulled up Google Maps and recognized how far away I was on the map. I saw my little blue dot at the bottom of Argentina, which is so far down there. And I realized I had a lot of work in front of me and that this was only the beginning of what would be a challenging next couple months to break out of. So that spooked me for sure. And that's when I decided that my slow mad journey was going to come to an end. We finished up Patagonia. We successfully navigated getting Luca out of the country. Luca is my girlfriend and I's dog. And so once we finished that up, we boarded the flight to Miami because that was the only place where I had any kind of clue around where I was going to get stability. That was the place I was most familiar. It was the place where I had moved from a year and a half ago. And so we went back, and that started the next chapter, which was integrating and getting things set up in Miami. But anyway, the first bullet of the year is that I started on a what I thought would be my game plan for the entire year, which was a slow mad 3 to 4 months per place, move around, explore the world, work all the same time. And I just dramatically underestimated how challenging that would be while also scaling a company, while also taking the next steps in a relationship. So I found that out the hard way. And that was the theme of the first 4 to 6 months, because the rundown nature I started the year with then carried into needing to get out of that, then carried into moving to Miami. And then when I got to Miami, we jumped into the next bullet, which is buying my first condo and immediately regretting it. So upon landing with all my stuff, with all my girlfriend's stuff and our dog, we had to begin the process of finding a place to buy. I'm currently sitting in the place that we bought. I wanted to buy something for no other reason than the forced stability that comes with it. So we toured a bunch of places from a cramped Airbnb. So we had all our stuff in a 1-bedroom Airbnb in the middle of the neighborhood that I kind of thought we would want to spend time in, where we ultimately ended up moving. And buying or finding real estate from a place of no stability or scarcity is about the worst thing that you can do, because you don't do the necessary due diligence. You don't do the necessary work. You don't do the necessary kind of calm exploration. It's all a little bit rushed. So we toured a ton of places and found this place, which we're currently in, that we loved. It was beautiful. It was well designed. It was an incredible view of the sunrise. It was tons of natural light, glass everywhere. It was beautiful. And so we made an offer on it, and it ultimately checked a lot of boxes for what we wanted. After about 3 weeks of negotiation, again, from an Airbnb that was about to kick us out, so we really had to make a move, we ended up signing a contract, and we got it at a great price. So negotiated down from ask, felt pretty good about it. And we negotiated, as part of that, a 1-month occupancy agreement, a pre-occupancy agreement, which I now know is kind of rare, that would allow us to move in right away. So the day we signed the contract, we ended up moving in. Actually, maybe it was like a week, but after the negotiation, we went back and forth, kind of striking out a handful of things and adding in furniture and all this stuff. And that'll be important as I get to the next part, because I thought that the contract and final negotiation was when the inspection period started. That's important because when we move in, our first night there, that's when the noise started. And we visited this place only during the day for not much more than a couple hours. And we really didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. But in our first night here, it became immediately apparent that we lived overlooking one of the loudest intersections in all of Miami. And with that noise came a chest pain that I cannot describe to this day. Luckily, as I'm sitting here, it is gone. But in the first 3 or 4 days there, I had this gutting, wrenching dagger in my chest because we live in a loud city. Miami is home notoriously to a lot of cars, a lot of people who think it's cool to drive fast, a lot of people who think it's cool to have a loud car. And when you live, like I'm looking right now out my window, overlooking the entry point of a highway and a 5-way intersection, you hear just about every single car that goes onto those streets from this apartment. And I'm laughing because just retelling the story, basically I was ready to leave the apartment and I felt this just rush of cortisol and regret and all this. And so obviously it's not easy to just kind of uproot after we had moved all our stuff in here. I didn't know the implications of kind of backing out of a contract. So I pulled up the contract and I looked for the inspection period and I threw it into ChatGPT. And I asked, like, what is the maximum date that I can get out of this contract? And my understanding was it was 7 days after the last signature was signed. Turns out that was not the case, but I thought it was. And so I look up the date. Today's the last day. We got to make a decision. And we texted the realtor to back out. And he was like, okay, like that's fine. I think you're in the inspection period, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, we were not in the inspection period. And so I misunderstood the effective date of the contract. I sent it to him. I basically then had to make a choice. Do I actually want to leave and I lose my $100,000 that I'd already put in escrow? Long story why it ended up being that much, but that was how much was in escrow. And I either had a choice of getting out, losing that deposit, or staying in a place I didn't really like. And I thought I had to decide, within that day. And so I ultimately took the other choice, which was to stay. I did feel better when we made that choice. Then I spent 8 weeks in absolute limbo, closing on a place that deep down I didn't really want, but I was coming around to. But I was dealing with a financial colonoscopy that was out of this world. And I used a lender from a big bank, and that big bank then has to do every kind of check and every dollar that you've ever spent. And as an entrepreneur without a W-2, it's even more difficult. So I didn't close on the place for 2.5 months until after submitting my offer. So I sat in limbo for all of May, all of June, until July 4th. I finally closed on the place. And that was the first time all year that I took a deep breath and could kind of release all of the energy that got me there. And I say the reason I'm smiling is like reliving that 6-month journey of going to multiple countries, exploring around, not really wanting to stay in any of them, finding a place, thinking that was the perfect place, closing or putting in an offer, moving in, hating it, deciding to leave, being unable to leave, and then after being unable to leave, taking 2.5 months to then close on the place, to finally close on it, that brought me to July 4th. And that was the first time all year that like I said, I took a deep breath. So that was the first 6 months of the year, basically, on the life front. And if it sounds like that was a energetically draining 6 months, it's because it was. And I took a little solo retreat at the end of July, or the beginning of July, and said, all right, what on earth happened this first 6 months? And that was really the only 3 days that I took off for the entire year. And you'll see why that is important. So anyway, that's the first kind of quick summary of my first 6 months of the year. And that led to what ended up being a far better next 6 months of the year, but not without an absurd amount of emotional toll, mental toll, because during this entire process, the business is scaling, but also going through volatility. And through that ungrounded nature that I was bringing from my personal life, I wasn't performing at my best. So I'm going to dig all into that in a little bit on in the video. But basically, that closing of the condo brings me into the third bullet, which is I integrated my life fully with my girlfriend on multiple continents. So traveling with me throughout the first 6 months of the year was my beautiful girlfriend, Sammy, and our dog, Luca. But looking back on that 6 month period, this was not an environment built to deepen a relationship. So neither of us had community in any place that we went, which means we really relied on one another for all social engagement, for all exploration, for all kind of emotional regulation. When you have outside factors that are independent of the relationship impacting you in some way, and then you're only really engaging with one person on average on a day-to-day basis, it's easy to kind of project the thing you're feeling into something they're doing or something they said or something they're doing and operating. And we felt that throughout the year in those first 6 months, where our relationship was solid, but not growing. And I think looking back, it's very challenging to take those next steps of integration when you're constantly moving. So when we settled on getting the place in Miami, we started to take steps toward that. But immediately within 2 or 3 weeks after closing on the place in July, we moved to Amsterdam. So for anyone who hasn't watched any of my videos, Sammy is from the US, but has lived in the Netherlands for 5 or 6 years. She has an apartment there. She has tons of friends there. She's built a whole life there. And I met her there 2 summers ago, and we've really integrated and kind of come together doing the first 6 months remotely. And then we've been traveling, and then at this point have now lived together for about a year and change. And when July rolled around and it came time to kind of spend the summer in Amsterdam, which was our agreement at the beginning of the year, I was a little bit reluctant because I was so run down from the first 5 or 6 months that I wasn't that excited about going and uprooting my environment again and reestablishing my routines and my one-on-ones with all my team members and my daily workflows and things like that. But I knew that integration is about compromise. And so I went there with the asterisk being that work was going to be my priority while I was there, because I had so much pent up working energy because of all the things I did to start the year that were not work, that were logistics, that were emotionally draining, that were moving around, that I really wanted to fully sink my teeth into the business for the last 6 months of the year. And that presented a ton of challenge because it's a 9-hour time difference. And so when I got there, I would work from 7 or 8 a.m. to 4. I would take a break to lift, and then my team would get on at 5 p.m. European time. And then because I wanted to keep pushing the tempo and establishing culture and push forward initiatives, I would stay on my computer until 10 or 11 at night. And that is not easy when the other person wants you to fully engage with their environment that they've built a life around. But I was so focused on work during that time that I wasn't willing or actively looking to engage socially with a lot of other people or explore the city or really do a lot of social things because I felt that I was underworked. I really was excited about what we were building and what we were working on, and I felt I hadn't performed at the level I wanted to start the year. And so that created its own challenge of working through what it feels like to prioritize something like building a business while also being in the other person's kind of home environment as we do this multiple location integration. We ultimately agree that we want a place in the US, a place in Europe, and to rotate between them. So the first month of the summer, it led to a lot of hard conversations about priorities, planning, growth, what it means to make trade-offs when you have a priority, and setting boundaries of what you're willing and not willing to do socially, or being firm about the things that are most important to you and what that might mean for the other person. It just forced a lot of challenging conversation that I'm extremely glad we had, but it was painful in the moment. And I think why I'm like not struggling to talk about this, or why it's challenging to put this into words, is those are some of the harder conversations of the year, and thinking back on them kind of puts you back in that place. But a lot of that was repaying the debt of, like I said, that I had borrowed at the beginning of the year. At this point, as we head into the new year, I'm feeling much stronger about how that integration has gone. It just took a lot more pain than I was expecting, or a lot more just energy than I think people think combining lives and moving in with one another takes. Certainly far more than I expected. So maybe I should have just lowered my expectation for how easy I thought it would be. But anyway, I say all this because those first 9 months now were really extended. So what I thought was going to happen at the end of 6 months was I had a place, I would reestablish routine and footing and things like that. That didn't happen. I went to Amsterdam. I then had to kind of extend this journey, and that led to even more growth and even more conversation. And I can kind of look back and smile at all that now, because yes, it was challenging. Yes, it took a lot of energy emotionally, but I think it forced growth and conversation that wouldn't have happened if we had just stayed in the same place. And so at this point, we have a good place here in Miami that we're making our own. We have a good overview of some travel we want to do. We have a solid foundation of how we want our relationship to progress. But if you would ask me how things were going at certain points of the year, I would say they were very challenging. And this isn't, casting judgment on, is that a good thing or a bad thing, or should it have been easier or should it have been harder? I think I just wanted to put this bullet in there because that was a major thing that happened all year, was that all of this is through the lens of what does it look like to integrate and build a life with someone else that makes things a lot harder than I've historically operated when I was just kind of on my own. And so as we head into 2026, I'm very grateful for all of the challenging conversations, the challenging growth, the love that I have for her, the plan that we have for the year ahead. But it's just not easy. And I know that future me watching this one will have wanted to know about the ups and downs of the year and kind of try to explain where those came from. But that was a giant bullet this year of fully integrating my life with someone else, integrating my goals with them, integrating my lifestyle with them, integrating vision and planning and everything else that comes with progressing a relationship. So that leads nicely to the fourth bullet, which is I took the fewest number of days fully off life and work of any year at any point in my life. So now, what you might have seen from telling that story of the year so far, there were not very many restful periods for me. There were a lot of energy intensive things just in the first 6 months. Now, I want to preface this. This was not a bad year. This was not I did nothing fun. And as I started to do my review, I felt myself kind of talking through the energy that I had here at the beginning of this review. And I shut my notebook and kind of went and jumped in the ocean and then said, I'm going to force myself to come up with 50 awesome things that happened this year. Because there were a lot of awesome things that happened. But I think I was caught up energetically and emotionally because I was extremely under-rested. And I couldn't fully enjoy and engage all the things I was doing because I didn't have the capacity. I felt run down. I felt I didn't have just the footing or foundation or juice to really bring it on the day-to-day. And in looking back on the year, this was the biggest mistake that I made. and it was not taking the time that I needed to recharge, to zoom out, to refresh my perspective, because I just went from thing to thing to thing, place to place to place, stress to stress to stress. And I didn't really come up for air except for 3 days in the beginning of July. After I closed on the condo, I went to the beach. I can see the hotel that I stayed at here. And I went to the beach for 3 days and was like, all right, we made it. We got the place, 6 months, whatever. Let's take a deep breath. How do we want to go perform the next 6 months? And that was critical for ultimately having a much more successful last 6 months of the year than first 6 months. However, the next time I took any time off was my time in Costa Rica. And so from January to December 11th, I took 3 days to myself, not thinking about work or not thinking about some kind of life logistic or heavy conversation or integration or any. I had 3 days. And luckily, I took that 9 days to go to Costa Rica because I needed it desperately. And everyone in my life benefited when I returned. Because, like I said, the first 6 months of the year, I was doing some kind of non-work logistic seemingly every day, whether it was moving, closing on the condo, whatever. How I compensated for that was I didn't take any time off of work because I felt that I wasn't fully engaged with work all the time. And because of that, I felt like deep down I didn't deserve time off because I wasn't performing at the level that I wanted to. But ultimately, I couldn't perform at the level I wanted to because I wasn't getting the rest I needed. And so I say all that because it's very hard to tell you need rest when you're extremely under-rested. And since I didn't have any of that blocked in advance, I just kept the gas pedal down and just kept jumping into whatever the next thing. I checked the Slack analytics and I logged into Slack from my desktop, from my computer, 335 times this year. Over 90% of days I engaged in Slack in some way. And so I just didn't take the time off from everything that I needed. And this was one of my biggest mistakes of the year, like I said. And I'll talk about this more in the lessons and realization section because I'm determined to not let this happen again in the year ahead. And that's all about kind of putting my own oxygen mask on before I try to help others. But this was a summary bullet of the year after those first three of ending the slowmad journey, getting the condo, fully integrating my life with another person on multiple continents. The result, all while, I haven't even gotten into the business side of things here, but all while I'm running a 30-person company, I just didn't take the time off that I needed. And I couldn't tell I really needed the time because I was so under-rested. And I'm, again, smiling because it all makes sense. Some of the things I felt and dealt with and just experienced this year, it all makes sense when you look back in hindsight. But taking that little time off was a mistake because I realized the benefit of it after I returned from my trip off. I was more engaged in my relationship. I had a refound energy for work. Every person in my life could just see the life behind my eyes again. And I just regret not taking that earlier, but I'm not here to kind of wallow on regrets. I'm just here to make improvements and iterations for the year ahead. So that was the fourth bullet, which is I didn't take enough time off. Now, my fifth bullet of the year is I became the physically strongest that I've been in 10 years. Despite all the moving around and the ups and downs emotionally, I am extremely proud of my training this year. If there's one thing that I can hang my hat on this year, is that I got strong. My diet and sleep, those were mediocre relative to recent years from the travel and work and, not being dialed in, for lack of a better way to describe it. But this was the single most consistent year of training of my life. I worked every day with a coach remotely, but he did all of my programming. Shout out Tyler from Built Better. Highly recommend checking them out. Every single week this year, he did my programming for 4 lifts and then added in 2 cardio sessions. I was so consistent with my training because it was the one thing that I had 100% control over. No matter where I was, I could find a gym where I could train, where I could improve, where I could track my lifts, where I could make progress, and I did. And at the end of the year, I wanted something to train for rather than just day-to-day of adding weight, adding reps. So I heard DJ Shipley on the Huberman Lab podcast. You can go look that one up. He runs a company called GBRS Group, and they have this performance standard, which is a handful of movements where they give you the tiers and standards of some of the people that they train and what they expect And I heard that on the podcast and was like, I'm going to do that thing on Thanksgiving Eve, so the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And that is going to be my new test that I complete every year for the next 10 years, with the goal being when I'm 40, I want to be in better shape than I am when I'm 30. High bar, but I think a very doable bar. So for the 4 weeks heading into that, I had this laser focus on this training, and I was very, very happy with the results. So to rattle off my health and fitness numbers from the year, I'm weighing about 215, which is a little bit heavier than I want to be. I want to be 200. So I'm a little bit on the heavier side, but resting heart rate 53, HRV of 50. And then the performance test is a handful of movements, specifically the broad jump, and I jumped 7 feet 9 inches. Pull-ups, I did 17. Bench press with your body weight, I did 215 by 6. That was my weakest one, and I'm going to fight to improve that in the year ahead. Trap bar deadlift, I did 375 by 7. I was pretty happy with that one. Plank for 3 minutes, that's the highest standard, and I stopped there. I probably could have gone longer. Farmer's carry with body weight, so I had 105-pound dumbbells in each hand. Walk for 300 meters, I think, and that was the highest standard. And then 800-meter run I did in 3 minutes. So why I like that is you can train for all of those things. They're relatively holistic fitness challenge, and they give me standards that I can hang my hat on of like, okay, if I hit the highest on that and they train pretty good athletes, I'm in good physical shape. So very happy with my strength progress. Diet, sleep, those will be cleaned up in the new year. And I think those are symptoms, or those are directly correlated to the stability you have in your day-to-day, in your environment, in your routine. And I have that at a level that I haven't had for quite a long time as I film this. So my goal for the year ahead is just take all of those numbers and improve them by 10 to 15% by the end of the year. This allows me to zoom out. It allows me to train with a long-term perspective. It allows me to have defined targets to program around. My coach takes the strengths and weaknesses of each of my tests and says, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And so I'm really enjoying my physical training this year and how simple it is, how sustainable it is. I got rid of a ton of nagging injuries. I'm more flexible. My body's feeling much better. So extremely proud of my training this year. And I hope I look back, I know I will look back at the end of next year and the next 10 years saying, if you can just eke out 5 to 10 to 15% improvements, fighting against Mother Nature and aging, you're in one hell of a rare company. And so that was the 5th bullet. I became the physically strongest I've been in 10 years, and I will continue to improve that going forward. Bullet number 6 is I had to continually refine and re-underwrite my relationship with money. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but high level, this was the first year of my business journey where my income went down year over year. And it was also the most volatile year in terms of markets and investing, and just kind of creates this weird psychological effect where you see big numbers swinging around that 5 years ago, I would have thought there's just no way I would ever see that type of thing. And your identity has to catch up to it. You have to come up with your own money heuristics and re-underwrite your beliefs and have conversation with people who are ahead of you and ask for their advice on things. It was just an interesting year seeing my income fall a bit, not a lot, but just the first time where it wasn't like a clear leap forward. And I'll dig into how all that happened on the business side. But seeing your just numbers swing around is not a emotionally easy thing to deal with. So my big takeaway of that is like, stop looking at the numbers, stop, checking things, make it harder, add friction to evaluate where you're at, where you don't want to be just refreshing prices of anything or accounts or any of that. So I threw this bullet in there because I've talked a ton about the growth that I've had to do with my relationship with money from the last 5 years as I've increased my earnings and had more and supported a lot of people in my life. And this was the year that I don't feel I progressed a ton in this one. I just felt I had to deal with things I'd never dealt with before. So I guess that's progress in some way, in that I had to come up with some new systems and new rules and new boundaries and simplify things and look into while also simplifying things, also looking at more complex things because you unlock the ability to do so as you grow financially. Anyway, this was just an interesting year where I did accomplish my goal of lowering my spending year over year. So that was, if you watched last year's video, that was a big goal I had for this year, was just rein things in from a just spending perspective, cutting things that were frivolous and being ruthless about only investing in things that bring me more time, energy, happiness, speed, ease, education, all of that. And so that ultimately worked, and I'm very happy with it. But it was just an interesting year financially. And I know a lot of people who are invested in anything felt that when you have a new administration come in and the Fed's cutting rates. And I used to work on Wall Street, so I'm still very interested in this stuff. And I can make a whole video on how I think about how things are going to progress from here. But it was just a interesting, and in the context of all the other bullets that I listed in terms of like day-to-day lifestyle volatility, an interesting year to also have that going on in the background. And that might have affected how I felt on a daily basis. And again, I'm not here to judge myself or be critical of anything, but it's just something to point out that this is not a game that ends. There's not a number that you hit where you stop having to level up your beliefs around money. There's not an income amount that makes everything easier. In fact, I found that it just becomes more challenging because you have to come up with just completely new systems and beliefs and operating principles and things like that as you grow. So anyway, I just want to throw this bullet in here because it was something I spent time on this year, but definitely not as big of an impact as I've had in prior years, in terms of like all I thought about in prior years was like, how am I going to create more abundance and think more abundantly, and where am I going to invest and all that. I didn't pay nearly as much attention to that this year, but it did take an emotional toll kind of watching things swing around. So that's just bullet number 6. I had to continually refine and re-underwrite my relationship with money, and I don't see that ending anytime soon. My 7th and final bullet on the year is that I felt like I was simply operating below my potential in both life and business. And that's how I would summarize this year so far. And I say so far, but that's how I would summarize this year. I left a lot on the table, and for the first time feel I operated below my potential. I think in the last 4 or 5 years, I've operated damn near my potential and exceeded what I thought was my potential for quite a few. But this is one where I have expanded what I know is possible from my life, my effort, my health, my business, my mindset. And I felt I came up short. I feel I could have been much happier, more grateful, more emotionally stable, more resilient. I know I could have been a better partner to my girlfriend. I could have been more present and empathetic with her. I could have been way better as a business partner had I been a bit more grounded personally. I could have been a much better operator. I could have led the team much better. I could have been more effective. Even if my workouts were effective, I could have pushed even harder there. And I know I have another level in me. But that's why I sit down and do these reviews, because I did a version of this last year, but it was shallower. I didn't revisit it often enough. I didn't use it to change my behavior this year. And it was such a priority for me to evaluate a year where I feel that I was below my potential, investigate why, and then come up with rules and principles that I'm going to talk about here in a second that allow me to make 2026 better than 2025. And I know that's going to happen. I have a very strong feeling as we head into this year, energetically and presence-wise, and just everything that I'm now working on and working towards and the foundations I built. I feel so much better going into this year than I did last year. And I think there's something to be said about that. I think when you deal with a more challenging year, thank goodness I got those 9 days in Costa Rica, because that fully reset my drive, my ambition, my energy, my everything. And I'm very grateful for the challenges that I faced this year, because you can use that pain as a compass for things to improve. So that's my year in terms of life bullets. To reskim all of them, just to recap. Started the year on a South American slowmad adventure, realized that was not for me. Bought my first condo, immediately regretted it. Integrated lives fully with my girlfriend on multiple continents. Took the fewest number of days fully off life of work of any year of my life. became the physically strongest I've been in 10 years, and know that will be the case in future years. I had to continually refine and re-underwrite my relationship with money. And the theme of it all was that I felt like I was operating below my potential. With all of that reflection, I have 7 lessons and realizations on life in general that I'm going to dig into next. So let's dive in. All right, diving into my lessons and realizations on the life front from this year. Number 1 is your environment will win in the long run, for better or worse. Charlie Munger has a great quote about incentives, and it's, show me the incentives and I'll show you the result. And then he has a second quote, which is, never think about something else when you could be thinking about incentives. So that's great for business. But the personal life version is, show me the environment and I'll show you the result. And never think about something else when you could be thinking about your environment. I sometimes say that I'm a liquid that takes the shape of its container. When I have a solid environment, low friction, familiarity, routine, I am an unstoppable forward-moving force. But without those things, I will just spill all over the floor, and I will struggle to build momentum or progress towards anything. And I really felt that throughout the year, moving from place to place, or not having the environment I wanted when I was in a certain place. So like when I moved into this condo and it was very loud, that was not an environment that was conducive. When I was bouncing back and forth between Mexico City and then Argentina, that was not an environment. And then when I went to Amsterdam and had to kind of reintegrate and redo all of my routines and things like that, my environment was not set up and conducive for me to win. However, I've taken this lesson already and put it into practice, where I'm not going to be moving at all in the year ahead. I'm not going to be exploring quite as much. I'm not going to be trying to blend work and travel. I am going to be more stable and start to focus more on my environment, where we've committed to stay in this place for the year. I'm going to build out an awesome studio that I really like to film in. I'm going to build out a bedroom that's super comfortable. I'm going to build out just the type of place where I really want to spend time. This is true beyond just your physical environment. This is digital environment, with the people that you're reading, the people you're engaging with, the way your phone screen is set up, the apps you have on your phone, your social environment, the people you're spending your time with. The list goes on. And I think I'm going to spend significantly more time thinking about, am I curating an environment that I love to be in? So physically, digitally, am I creating an environment that is conducive for creativity and output and connection, rather than doom scrolling or news or sensationalism, whatever thing of the day is going on. So this lesson, I put it as number 1 because I think it's the single most important thing I learned this year. It's that if you do not spend enough time curating, crafting, and just investing in your environment, you are not going to live up to your potential. And so in the year ahead, I will take significantly more effort towards this, and we'll be sitting here at the end of the year reaping the rewards. My second lesson is, travel is a tool, not a default lifestyle. I've talked about this already, how I thought that I wanted to travel and work at the same time. It is not what I wanted. And luckily, I didn't spend my whole life, working a 9 to 5 thinking, oh, one day I'll go be a digital nomad and be so happy. It's like, no, I experimented with it. 2 months went by. I realized it was not for me, and I got out. And maybe if you're a solopreneur, it can work. But to try and work and travel while scaling a business, there's just too many relationship dynamics with each of your team members that you have to change and re-underwrite and review when you change environments, that it just becomes exhausting. So I still plan to travel, and I will use it tactically to enrich my life, broaden my perspective, take my future family, visit incredible places, cross things off my bucket list, but I will not be going from place to place. And if you said that that's how this year would have turned out at the beginning, I don't know if I would have believed you. I firmly thought that I was going to go 3 months to a bunch of new places and do that in 2026 and 7 and 8. That was not the case. And so I'm glad I learned this. But my single lens for this is, I want to curate a travel plan that I cannot wait to explore, while also building a home base I can't wait to return to. So if you take the first 2, focusing on your environment and making travel a tool, I want to be very excited to leave every once in a while and equally excited to come back. And if I have those 2 things, I've really nailed the environment front and the travel front. Lesson number 3 is to put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others. The airlines have it right. I should have put my own oxygen mask on this year. I was not at my best, which means other people did not experience the best version of me. And that sounds simple, but if I'm not at my best and I don't feel on my front foot, people won't get to experience the best version of me. But I had this faulty belief thinking that if I took the time that I needed for myself, it would somehow worsen the relationship or my business because the other would feel like I was abandoning it. So I just kind of gutted it out from a place of being under-rested and unclear practically the whole year. But upon returning from my week off the grid, I kind of said this already, but my ability to show up for my girlfriend, for my business partner, for my family, for my workouts, for my interactions with someone in the elevator, every single thing improved when I took a little bit of time for myself. And combining that with the thing I talked about already of you can't recognize that you need to put your own oxygen mask on when you have it off. It's like this weird place of if you are under-rested, you don't see that you need rest. And so it was this vicious cycle of not getting the time I needed and then continuing to push the gas pedal down and then failing to do it again and again and again. And I ultimately just kind of pulled the ripcord and was like, I need these 9 days, communicated it to everyone. And as a result, I felt better. Everyone else got to experience a better version of me. And so I will not let that happen again this year. I'll be far more proactive in making sure that I'm getting the things that I need, the rest I need, the clarity I need, so I can show up better for everyone else. So that alone excites me tremendously as we head into the new year because, ultimately, I want to be better for everyone. And I now have evidence of what happens if I don't take the time I need. And I have evidence of how much better I am when I do get the time I need, such that I can clearly communicate to everyone, I'm feeling this way. I need to do this for me. And here's what's going to happen as a result when I'm back, because you've all seen when I'm at my best, what it looks like. So I will not make that mistake again. My oxygen mask will be firmly put on before I try to put on anyone else's. Related to that, my 4th lesson is stop trying to fix your stress levels from a place of being stressed. These are related, and I probably could have folded this one into the one above, but I needed to just drill this one into my brain that you cannot try to fix your stress when you're stressed. You need to proactively plan time just in case, not just in time, such that you have something blocked on the calendar specifically for recharging, reevaluating, and iterating based on things that have happened. So for me, that's going to be at least one Friday per month where I get out of my normal environment and evaluate how I'm feeling about things, check in on my goals, check in on my systems, check in on my path, my vision, my principles, my values, all those different things. I have a dedicated day of the month where I know that I'm going to get that type of refresh. And I'll probably do one long weekend per month as well, likely at the end of the month where I do some kind of travel or switch up my environment, do a staycation, pop over to an island, something that breaks me out of my day-to-day, again, to do that type of kind of planning and evaluation. And then every quarter, I'll be taking at least 10 full days completely off work to recharge, reflect, explore, whatever I need. So if that trip is I want to go travel and explore and experience something new, great. Or if it's the end of the year and I want nothing new, I just want to distill everything that happened so far, I will do whatever I need at the time. So having these planned in advance immediately lowers my stress level because I know that I will not be in a place again in the year ahead operating from scatteredness, under recovery, just lower resilience, all of that. So I will not make this mistake again this year. And that's why I have like 4 lessons that are all kind of the same thing. It's just get the rest you need, get the rest you need, get the rest you need. Speaking of rest, my 5th lesson from the year is happiness and rest are skills that must be trained. I used to think that happiness was automatic and that rest was automatic. This was just something that if certain conditions were going right, you'd be happy. And if you weren't working, rest would happen and you'd be recharged. But I think a lot of the modern world and environments and things are set up where it's hard to be happy and it's hard to rest. if you define these terms, the skill of resting is how recharged you can feel per unit of time. So the best rester in the world needs only 1 second of mental rest and they'd be back at their highest level of performance. I'm going to use mental here. I'm very rarely physically super fatigued. I'm not an Olympic athlete. I'm not a professional athlete. I train hard, but I don't fatigue myself very much. So I'm talking mental here. That person would only need a second of mental rest and they'd be, boom, back at their highest level of performance. Happiness is how content you can be in the present moment. So very simply put, the happiest person in the world loves exactly where they are right now, needs nothing more, and just loves the present moment to the highest extent possible. So both of these are spectrums that must be worked on. You can be very good at resting. You can be very poor at resting. You can be very good at happiness. You can be very bad at happiness, because you could have the most incredible thing going on in your life, but if you focus on the one small detail that's not right, you can make yourself miserable. So being able to focus on the right things and reframe your perspective is a skill. And I think that's where a lot of happiness comes from. And so everyone kind of has to do this on their own. I have to figure out the types of rest that work for me. I got to block it in advance. I got to protect that time. I have to get better at resting this year. And I also have to train my mind to, even if something's not perfect, even if something's not going the way I thought it would, even if something is below my expectation, I can reframe to enjoy whatever it is going on in the present moment. And I think a more skilled version of me this year has a better year because they're able to rest with less time and they're able to be happy despite a lot of chaos, a lot of emotionally taxing things. And so I just remind myself here of, you have to change. You have to make a point to go and improve your skill of happiness and your skill of rest, because I know in the future I'm going to have challenging years, but I want to be able to have a challenging year and stay happy throughout it. I want to be able to have a year where I have more going on and less dedicated time to rest, but still be able to recover in an effective way. And so just a reminder here that pretty much everything I view in life is a skill, but these two specifically were two skills that became apparent I was not as good as I wanted to be this year. And so this is my note to improve them next year. My sixth lesson is to spend more time learning to precisely describe your emotions. So most of my interpersonal problems this year were symptoms of undercommunication. So whether that was with my family, my girlfriend, my co-founder, even myself, I didn't always have clarity on how to describe how I was feeling and what I needed to fix it. And you can see how these are related because I didn't have enough time to reflect on it. I didn't have enough time to define it. I didn't have enough time to communicate it. So I either avoided getting what I needed, rest, because I couldn't explain why I needed it, or I would just know I needed it, didn't know how to properly describe it, and just lurch toward it without communicating it to those who would be affected by it. Both of these are not good things. And the solution is to spend more time figuring out how to precisely describe how I feel. So for example, the word tired, kind of a useless word because people will say tired. Do you mean you're physically tired? Or do you mean you're sleepy? Do you mean you're emotionally drained? Are you mentally fatigued? Are you scattered? Are you unclear? Are you depressed? Right? All of these are completely different feelings and require completely different solutions. So I'm going to write about this a ton in the year ahead, but I took all of the journals where I was clearly trying to figure out what was missing or what was going wrong or what I was feeling. And I've operationalized, okay, I'm scattered, which means I haven't had enough time to assess my responsibilities and my projects and close the loop on certain things. I'm unclear. That's a completely different feeling than being underthought, which is another way of saying I have something that I'm very clearly working on, that I'm excited to work on, and I haven't had enough time to work on it. Both of those, the solution is for me to get some time to myself, but the reason I need that time is very different. And so there's a handful of those that I could describe here, but I've just tried to get more clear on what is it that I'm feeling and what is the solution for that specific feeling so that I can communicate what I need, why I need it, and the result of me getting that thing. Like if I'm scattered, I can say I need time to assess my open loops, that will allow me to fully engage in whatever it is I'm doing because I won't have this background kind of processing going on. That type of precise communication, I think, will solve a lot of interpersonal problems in the future for me, because I can then also understand other people and go, okay, what is it that they need? How can I help them precisely describe it? How can I help them get what they need? So I'm pumped about this one. This one hit me on the beach when I was walking in Costa Rica of just, I had not defined those specific feelings enough. And once I do, I can get what I need from them. I know I said I had 7, but I ended up having 9, with my 8th being stop deciding, design a hell yes, and build toward it. So rather than deciding between 2 paths, I felt I spent a lot of this year deciding, should I move here? Should I move there? Should I go to this place or should I not go to this place? Should I work on this thing or that thing? And I think rather than fix yourself to 2 potential options, there's always a third option, which is just create a path that you'd be excited about taking that you're not currently considering, and then go build toward that thing. So for example, with this current environment, this apartment, I ended up choosing between 2 of them because I thought those were my only 2 options. But if I had been a bit more clear and rested and had more time, I could have zoomed out, designed more specifically exactly what I wanted, and then gone and built towards that thing. Not necessarily build the place, but with the end in mind, know, okay, is this the thing that I really want? Rather than, these are my only 2 options, I got to choose. And I think this is true for every area. Like, what is your hell yes body? Build toward that rather than think, should I do this diet or this workout plan or that workout plan? It's like, start with the end in mind, design your hell yes, and then work backwards toward something. What is your hell yes financial situation? How can you build toward that? What's your hell yes relationship? How can you build toward that? So this year, I plan on being far more specific with my requests and preferences for all these different areas of my life, and then ruthlessly building towards them from a place of high agency. Rather than there's a fixed set of options. It's like, no, anyone can do anything now. We are armed with resources that go beyond anything any generation has ever had. And I think that is the foundation for designing things that you would be extremely excited and fulfilled and love having, and then use all of these tools and resources at your advantage to build towards it. So stop deciding, design a hell yes, build toward it. And last but not least, my 9th lesson and realization of the year is to have 3 goals, and only 3 goals: a health goal, a business goal, and a life goal to guide your daily actions. If you watched my video last year, I set 10 goals at the end of the video. I couldn't even tell you what 2 or 3 of them were because I barely looked at them again because it was intimidating. There were far too many. And I now look back on any year or any period of progress that I've ever had, and I've recognized that I had 3 things that I focused on, and 3 things only. So this year, I will set 3 main quests. I'm going to call them quests instead of goals because it reminds me of playing RuneScape back in the day. Quests were always a lot of fun, and if you have a quest, it makes it more enjoyable. So I will have 3 main quests. That will be my focus to start the year. I'll reevaluate them at the end of every quarter. And then I'll have a long list of side quests. These are 100% optional to pursue, and they're strictly a win if I complete them. So that's my main structure. Is I'll have 3 main quests, 1 for health, 1 for business, 1 for life. I'll talk about those at the very end of the video. And then I'll have a list of side quests in each of those areas, which, like, hey, if I do them at the end of the year, great, I'll celebrate it. But if not, I'm not going to beat myself up for it. And I look back on these 10 goals. 3 of them should have been main quests. The others should have been side quests. And then I wouldn't be sitting here like afraid to even look at that list at the end of the year because I ultimately didn't end up hitting a lot of them. So this is just a reminder to myself, you can have no more than 3 because you can only rattle 3 things off the top of your head. ABC, 1, 2, 3, stop, drop, and roll, blood, sweat, and tears. Think of all the things that you can easily remember. They're always in groups of 3. So I want to be able to recall my 3 goals at any time so that I can keep them top of mind and then use them to actually guide my decisions. So that's this year on the life front. Learned a ton, experienced a ton, super grateful for everything that happened, had a lot of fun, had a lot of growth, had a lot of pain, had a lot of everything, had a rich life this year, and I learned a lot from it. I got these takeaways, I got these lessons, I'm going to stamp them into my brain, I'm going to use them to change my behavior, and that's about all you can ask for from a year. So from here, I'm going to go deep on the business side of things, looking back at everything that happened on the business front and then repeating it with the lessons and realizations tactically around business that I had this year. All right, diving into the business recap and lessons, I'm going to follow a similar structure here of recapping in bullets everything that happened, and then diving into the lessons and realizations, the mistakes, the scars, the things I will use to change my behavior going forward that hopefully you can gain and learn from as well. First bullet, high level overall portfolio revenue was plus 18% year over year, but net after ads and labor was down 14% year over year. So we crossed the $8 million mark in overall revenue this year. But at the same time, our labor cost jumped 75% to almost 3 million. And our ad costs jumped about 100% to 1.1 million. Now, this was intentional. Our goal this year was to scale. Our goal this year was to build a bigger business. And we succeeded on some of those things and we failed on some of the others. So we expanded the team and added a department head layer that added more stability to the whole operation. That increased our labor costs, but a worthy investment because of the expanded capacity. And we also invested a lot more money into paid ads this year to build the skill of acquiring customers from cold traffic. Now, we had to pay to do that and fail at it to understand and learn the lessons necessary to let us ultimately scale much further. But some of those were expensive. We ran some things on the paid front that did not work or did not perform at the level that we wanted to. And so a good chunk of that quote unquote drop in profit was really just a reinvestment into learning a lot of new skills and figuring out how that entire world worked. So this was the theme for a lot of the year, threading the needle between expanding capacity, then filling that capacity, then expanding it, then filling it, back and forth, back and forth. And if you watched any of my videos throughout the year, you've kept up with that journey. Ultimately, we weren't able to offset the increase in both of those. So labor and ads combined did outpace the growth in revenue. However, the lessons that we learned, the skills that we built, and the team that we invested in will allow us to keep this team the same exact size, but do 50% more revenue or more in the year ahead. And that will ultimately or a good chunk of that will drop to the bottom line because we found our point of operational leverage and kind of contribution margin, which I'll talk about. I'm excited to drop those terms and talk about them in the lesson section. So that's the high level overview. Going vertical by vertical, our coaching vertical, our premium ghostwriting academy grew 23% year over year as we improved product and retention. Our digital product vertical grew by 13% to about 700K. And this was despite running 3 times the number of product drops this year compared to 2024. So higher revenue, but return on effort dropped considerably. Ship 30, our start writing online challenge, fell 40% to about 500K, despite turning live cohorts on, as we wanted to experiment with turning those back on and running them as live cohorts. I'll explain that mistake when I jump into the lessons and realizations, but that vertical ultimately underperformed because we didn't modernize the product. There were a lot of new AI features and platforms and things that I don't think we spoke to in the landing page and the offer and things like that. We also just didn't invest enough of our overall organic growth into growing that specific list. So I'll touch on that in the lesson section. Write with AI grew by 21% to over 620K. Very happy with that growth and the foundation it has. It is now the #1 education newsletter on Substack. Heck yeah, Justin and team there. It's been an awesome ride watching Write with AI grow, and we're very excited for that in the year ahead. And then also our new verticals, Digital Writing School, AI Content Agent, our Velocity Agency, and our Vortex Mastermind. Those all contributed about 300K in additional revenue with the foundation to do 7 figures or more in the year ahead. And none of those verticals existed at any time last year. So those were all new things. Now, how do we do all of this? A handful of things that contributed to this growth. We made 12 key hires, ascensions, and personnel improvements this year. Casper, our head of sales, Chris, our financial controller, another Chris, our head of media, Colin, our email and social ghostwriter. We elevated Andrew to head of tech ops. We hired TG, head of partnerships. We elevated Mitch to head of our AI content agent, and we added 4 more A+ CSMs, Sierra, Brittany, Travis, and Luke. Every single one of those team members have leveled up our overall operation and organization in a big way, because we also churned 10 team members this year, but I can go kind of apples to apples comparing person by person. And we've upgraded our entire team in every single area. And I think that is required to continue to grow both the size of the business and the overall efficiency of the business, is having the right people in the right seats, operating in a way that maintains culture and just creates a working environment that people love to show up to. So very happy with the investments that we made in our team this year, because they're starting to pay off. We've given a lot of people more ownership of certain verticals, of certain initiatives, of certain channels that take some time to get going. But once they kind of have the resources that they need, they have the time to work on things, and they get better as they keep working in that role, things are going to ultimately keep improving. So very happy with the compounding nature of the team investments that we made this year. On the PGA front, the big things we did were building the skill of driving traffic via ads and email to a webinar, pitching calls on the webinar, and converting those leads into customers, and also tracking the attribution of that whole thing. That was, of all the initiatives we had this year, learning to run webinars, paid traffic webinars, and operating them at a high level was the single highest leverage thing we did for PGA this year. On top of that, we then upgraded that skill of running one webinar into running our 3-day challenge. I did a full breakdown of our challenge recap in my last monthly review video. This was kind of our big event of the year that now we know how to run and can run 4 times in the year ahead. So very excited for that one. On top of that, we improved our money model by launching several products at different price points below our main coaching offer that kind of built a better value ladder. We had our 3P playbook, which is a $27 product that ascends people. We had a non-coaching version of PGA where you don't get a one-on-one coach, you just get the community and the course modules. That was a lower price point, but didn't take any bandwidth from the team. We did the challenge, which was a paid challenge where we were able to monetize about 50% of the ad spend in just low ticket sales. And then we had another $350 product drop that kind of re-engaged our list in a good way. So a lot of the PGA front this year was learning how to acquire customers that haven't been following us for a long time. And that is a far more challenging game. It's like a completely different business than organic only. But it has been extremely rewarding to learn that skill. It forces you to create a far better product. It forces you to be a far better communicator, a far better educator. And so we've really valued that journey. And I think we paid down so many of the ignorance taxes and ignorance debts that we had to ultimately pay to build the business that we ultimately want to build. So that was the PGA front, and we're very happy with that. We launched 3 digital products across our digital product kind of low ticket suite: low ticket launchpad, LinkedIn AI, and decision journaling. Those were all solid launches. We saw that vertical grow year over year. We are going to fold that into the digital writing school vertical for the year ahead, and I'll talk about that in the lessons and realizations and kind of focus and simplification section. But running 3 product launches, we wanted to push the envelope to see how many we could launch without kind of seeing diminishing returns, and we found that. I think it's really 1 to 2 rather than 2 to 3, because in terms of return on effort, just not worth it to do those big intense, create the product, market the product, launch the product launches consistently throughout the year, when you could really just do one and do a really good job with it. So that was on the digital product front. And then we also launched 4 new verticals. We launched our Velocity agency that Daniel is co-founded and running right now. That did its first $30K in revenue. We launched the Vortex Mastermind, which is kind of helping business owners in similar businesses as the different verticals that we run implement some of our playbooks directly with me. We launched Digital Writing School, which will be our $99 a month community for the year ahead. And then AI Content Agent. We've been running cohorts to help individuals build agents, learn the skill of building agents, implement agents within their business on the back of Write with AI. So that was high level what we accomplished this year to see that revenue growth. And I'm very excited about the year ahead, but this year was not without its scars in terms of we've learned a ton. There are so many things that I needed to reflect on and distill, such that if you're at the stage of the journey that we were at when we entered the year, hopefully you can take some of these lessons away. So that's the recap of what happened. Let's dive into what I learned and how I will implement all those new things in the year ahead. All right, diving into the business lessons and realizations. I got 9 of them for you here. And each of these are painful realizations and reflections and things that I will not mess up again, and just lessons and learnings about the way businesses work as you get to the level that we've gotten to. So starting with number one, it's not organic versus paid. It's all about marketing efficiency ratios. So let's get into this, because of all the parts of this video, this is the one I'm the most excited for, to rattle off all these different scars that I have here. So a lot of people ask us, what percent of your business comes from paid versus organic? And I used to jump in with some like kind of made up answer, like 90% organic and 10% paid, without really knowing. It was more like a feel thing. But after spending the entire year working on the paid side, I realized this question requires exceptionally more context to give any kind of useful answer. So when someone asks this, do you mean all customers analyzed by their first click? Or if so, what if they opted in from paid but then joined a webinar from an email after watching a YouTube video? Should that still be a paid sale? And what if someone opts in via organic but then books a call from a paid retargeting ad? Where should that go? And what about timelines? If someone saw an ad 6 months ago, clicked and opted in, then did nothing until they watched an organic YouTube video last week, who gets credit? And the more context you realize is required, the more you realize this question is kind of a pointless question. What people really mean is your marketing efficient? Meaning, based on what you're spending, whether that's on organic or on paid, are you efficient? Are you running and acquiring people at a decent cost? They're looking for a shortcut to see if your organic or your ads are working. But trying to slice the pie into paid versus organic fails to recognize that marketing is a blended ecosystem. These things all work together. Your ads are forced reach to people who have likely seen you before. Based on how platforms work, they're more likely to show an ad to someone who is likely to engage with it. And your content makes your ads more profitable by giving a place for customers who see an ad to then go do their due diligence on your organic. So if you stop one, the other would get much worse. If you spend less on ads, you get less organic reach. And if you stop making organic, you have more expensive ads. So these work together. And I think for a long time, I thought that you either ran an organic or a paid business, because we started as organic only. But now I realize you need both, and both work better when you have the other. So the real number to ask people is, what is their MER, marketing efficiency ratio? This is different than ROAS, which is return on ad spend, which is good for paid businesses. And it's better than CAC, which only looks at a cost per customer. I like MER because it's total revenue over total marketing costs. This allows you to compare organic, paid, blended, any business. It's how much are you spending to acquire customers and how much money are you making from those customers. That's it. And so this metric paired with net revenue after marketing spend are the two numbers I'm most focused on in the year ahead. And so as long as we can keep MER in a healthy 4 to 5x range, we can confidently scale up our organic team and our paid ad efforts, knowing that we're seeing a relatively good return. And so just to pause on this one for a second, if you only focus on MER, then you're going to get too obsessed with efficiency. So I'm just going to riff this one off the cuff, but if you have a business with an MER of 3 and it does $3 million in revenue on $1 million in marketing spend, that's $2 million in net revenue after ads. If you have a business that's 5-to-1 MER, but they only made $500K in revenue on $100K in ad spend, so $400K of net revenue after ad spend, you might say the second one's more efficient because it has a 5-to-1 MER, but you'd obviously want the second business that takes home more overall net revenue after ad spend. So both of these numbers are required. And I think asking someone what's their ROAS or what is their breakdown of organic versus paid, both of those are just overall not going to get you the real answer you're looking for, which is the business acquiring customers in a efficient way? And so I'm focused only on this blended metric of MER. And I got this from the e-commerce world because everyone in e-com runs paid and they run organic, and they need both because they know that they work together. So I'm just no longer trying to do this analysis of like, what's our overall organic acquisition and our paid channel acquisition, because the number of people who engaged with both organic and paid, and then ended up being customers is like 80% of our business. So am I really going to try to get more granular and like split it out when I can instead go, our entire ecosystem as a whole is clearly getting customers at a good level. Now let's go deploy additional spend on the highest performing channels. And that leads perfectly to the second lesson, which is perfect attribution is the enemy of scaling. To put this one simply, there's never going to be the perfect dashboard, the perfect attribution that lets you say, this ad led to this purchase, led to this customer. I'm in Hyros. I've tried Stape. I've tried all these different tools. It's just unreliable. And if you get too obsessed with knowing the exact perfect linear combination of ads and funnels that lead to the perfect, most efficient return, you're going to get caught up majoring in the minor. And this is a reminder to myself, because as we started to run paid, I was so caught up in knowing, okay, did this incremental dollar lead to this incremental return? And I was not focused on the right thing. And so when you zoom in so closely on such small details at our level, you fail to recognize that the health of the business as a whole is there. And you likely could scale if you weren't so obsessed with like, is this at a 2.5 or a 3.5x ROAS? And I have so many examples of this where these tools that say they do this perfect attribution and perfect tracking don't work because their number says a completely different number from a reliable source where, let's say we run a webinar and we pitch calls on that webinar, and people fill out an application directly on the webinar from a link that we drop in the chat. And I attribute that directly to a sale. And then I look at how much it costs to generate that number of applications and look at the overall ROAS from there. And then compare it to Hyros, which relies on them clicking on an ad and attributing that ad to that person and then linking these multiple servers. It just never adds up. And I think I drove myself crazy trying to have this perfect attribution, which is wrong. It's look at the overall health of things, look at the MER, and go, okay, if we want to scale, where is my hypothesis? What platform do I have the hypothesis will get me the highest next incremental return, and go run that test and start spending more. And so this is more just a reminder to myself that you cannot get caught up trying to have this perfect attribution, because it's just going to hold you back from taking the risks necessary involved with scaling. So not a huge takeaway here other than it connects to the first one of like organic versus paid and trying to attribute all these things. Zoom out and look at the overall health of your marketing. When you're running a specific funnel where there is a extremely linear trackable click journey, yes, you can look at, okay, this was a 2x ROAS if you only count all the people who engaged in every step along the way of this funnel. But also recognize that that's always going to be the low end of it, because it fails to recognize all the people that saw an ad from that funnel, then Googled your business, and then opted into an organic funnel from that. And so I just kind of lost my mind trying to have this perfect attribution. And now I can zoom out and go, all right, we're going to spend money. We're going to evaluate the overall return of that money, and we're going to spend more as long as that number's in check. So this is just future me or current me talking to past me. Don't get caught up majoring in the minor on these small things. Look at the overall health and then scale from that number. Third lesson is, as you scale, you shift the balance from purely how to what plus how. So as you add leverage, you must shift from pure production to QC and accountability. QC, accountability, and decision-making, I should say. So when you have a team of 3, you're able to whip the team around on different initiatives much faster because the cost of change is much lower. However, when you have a team of 30, the number of people impacted by your strategic decisions is much higher. And so you have to shift accordingly and say, all right, I know that the overall success of the business is going to come down to aligning the entire team on the highest leverage activities for the highest percentage of time in the correct, even though there's no correct, but the roughly correct order of sequencing to get us to the next level. And so to do that sequencing, to do that decision-making and surveillance and analysis of what to do next, you have to think about the what far more than just being in the nitty-gritty and doing everything yourself. And so this is twofold. It's shifting from doing the thing to deciding what to do, and then making sure the people doing the thing are doing the thing in a correct way. And that's just a very different skill than what gets you to $1 million a year, $3 million a year, where you are the one primarily doing a large percent of the actual production work. And so as you scale, going from just how do I do this thing and doing it to what should the team do in the first place? And then what is the team doing based on the thing that they're supposed to be doing, and are they doing that at the highest level? So this is just me saying that you have to unlearn the lesson of doing everything yourself. And you have to learn the new lesson of rewarding yourself for something taking a little bit slower or a little bit longer than it would have if you did it yourself, but knowing that by enabling someone else to do it and QCing them and helping them do it themselves, they're going to be able to do it more effectively over the long run, which again frees up your time over the long run. So kind of a rambling way of saying you don't have to be the one doing everything, but with that freed up time, you should use it and allocate it towards making better decisions and QC. It's like strategy, QC, and accountability. Those are the two things that you do not do at a lower level of revenue, but as you add leverage becomes critical. So that was just something I learned this year. And I think we've learned it as executives within the business, spending more time doing that strategic back and forth, kind of choosing what to work on. Because once you do that, when you have a team of assassins like we have, if you put them on the right thing, you will grow much faster. And I think we did a much better job of that towards the end of the year than we did at the beginning. And I had to learn this lesson to get there. Speaking of strategy, the fourth lesson is you need periodic time pulled out of the day-to-day to think strategically, and you must block it in advance. So if your job shifts from purely how to a lot more what, you need to block time for that type of thinking. You cannot jump from writing ads to thinking about the bottleneck of the business as a whole in the same day. These are two completely separate parts of the brain. And even trying to do that in the same day, let alone the same week, is challenging. And so you cannot do this type of high-level thinking if you're stuck in the day-to-day. But if you don't block it in advance, you are stuck on this kind of busy trap where there's always something you could do. So you keep doing that thing, and then you never zoom out and look at the actual thing that you should be working on based on all the different parts of the business, all the different data sources that you have, all the different opportunities that you have. And so I fell for this when my job called for more strategic decision-making, going and learning something completely new and evaluating, could we implement that? Could I take that from this different type of business? Could I go talk to this type of person? Like this strategic figuring out what to do is just as important as, it's more important than actually doing certain things. But if you never block time for it in advance, you will always default to the thing that got you to where you are, which is doing. And so I had to learn that. My co-founder had to learn that. If we do not block this in advance, it doesn't happen. And so I'm going to prevent going long periods of time without this strategic work by blocking one Monday per month where this is what I do. I don't take meetings. I don't engage in the day-to-day. I just think strategically about, are we working on the right things? Are we building the systems that are enabling our team to work on the right things? And just recognizing that I have to block this in advance because it's counterintuitive to zoom out. It will feel like you're moving slower, but when you accumulate correct decisions strategically over an entire year, you move much, much faster. So another reminder to myself here. All right, this one is fun. Number 5, know where your operating leverage and contribution margin kicks in and obsess over getting there. So this is going to be kind of a mathematical one. So try to pay attention to the numbers. And I'm going to start with an example here. Let's say a business has $200K in fixed costs that must be paid no matter how much it generates, and then an additional payroll of 20% of its revenue generated. So for all intents and purposes, I'm going to model our business with those numbers roughly. This business has dramatically different profit margins based on how much revenue it brings in that month. So let's say it does 300K. Fixed costs are 200. Variable costs are 20% of 300, which is 60. So total costs are 260. Profit is 40, margin is 13%. Not very good. Not a very good margin. That same business, if it does 600K in revenue, fixed costs of 200K, variable cost 20% of 600K, which is 120K. So total costs 320K. Profit now 280K. Margin 46%, much, much better. Same business, same fixed costs, different performance of that team, 4 times the margin, 4 times. Actually, this is 7 times the overall profit and 4 to 5 times the margin, right? And that is scaling in a nutshell. So let me explain our scaling journey through that lens and how I've learned the idea of contribution margin and operational leverage. So for our business, we have roughly fixed costs on marketing, success, and the management team. Everything else is roughly 20% of revenue just based on sales team commissions and things that we have to pay out when we get a sale. You can calculate the formula for your break-even number as a function of your fixed costs and your contribution margin. Contribution margin is a fancy way of saying gross margin, which is just the additional margin from an additional sale. So for us, we don't have cost of goods. We have fulfillment because we are a service. And so our contribution margin is roughly 80%, meaning our success team is mostly a fixed cost. Our front-end team, our front-end sales team is compensated roughly all in between closing team, management team, setting team, 20%. So as we scaled up this year, why these numbers are important is our break-even point continued to climb. So even though we were hitting higher and higher revenue numbers, we weren't breaking far enough above that point to see the positive benefits of our operating leverage kick in. So when our fixed costs were 100K and we had 80% contribution margin, we'd break even at 125K. When the cost doubled to 200K fixed, our break even doubles to 250K. And then every dollar after that resumes the 80% margin. However, as your break even climbs, you have to invest more money into ads, which means your contribution margin actually goes down since you have to pay more for each sale. So really this year, our contribution margin fell from 80% to about 65%, while our fixed costs went from 100 to 200. I kind of want to show this visual, but just think about this math for a second. If the break even last year was 100K divided by 80%, because that's the formula, the break even becomes 125K, meaning above that, it's profit. The break even this year, you take our double fixed cost, divide it by 0.65 rather than 0.8, and you get 310K. So this is kind of the crux of scaling, is that your fixed costs go up, your contribution margin goes down, which means your break even goes up significantly, more than the ratio of your fixed costs going up. And so you have to do more revenue than you think to get to the same level of profit that you had. However, your hypothesis is that by adding this additional fixed cost, you set the foundation for ultimately much higher total profit if you fully maximize that capacity. And that's currently where we sit. The team at 100K in fixed costs and 80% margin, contribution margin, likely couldn't have handled more than 350K in a month. So at its max capacity, that would have done 200K in profit. The current team at double the fixed costs and a much lower contribution margin could handle 4 to 5 times the revenue than the old team could. And so its max profit could be something around 650K, right? So you have to make these investments in scaling the team, in paying more per customer, in paying your team better. And that's the scale of challenging, or the challenge of scaling, because, and that's why most people give up around this point. It's like the amount of improvement your business has to have to operate with these much higher fixed costs. It's not an easy thing. And so I wish I would have done a better job understanding this equation, knowing where our new break-even and target revenue numbers were, and making sure we scaled our marketing and raised our prices accordingly. If you had told me that by doubling the team, you triple the break-even profit point, I wouldn't have, that had just been foreign to me. And I think this equation summarizes the year for us of seeing an increase in revenue, but a decrease in profit. Because the amount of additional revenue you need is more than just the amount you scale the team, but the ultimate amount of profit that that team can make is much higher. So I should have done a better job knowing what the max profit that the current team could generate was and obsessing over getting there. Now I know that number, and my co-founder knows that number, and the team knows that number, and we can hone in on it. But this is just like basic business stuff that no one teaches you, and you have to go learn the hard way. It's like, wow, we're making more money in revenue. Why isn't profit going up? Okay, we made a lot more money in revenue. Why did profit only go up a little bit? It's like, okay, there's math here. I needed to go learn that math. A mentor of mine kind of dropped that in conversation, and I was like, I can't believe you just said something off the cuff that basically would have saved me 6 months of mental toil and trying to figure this out. So anyway, if you are watching this in a scaling phase, go learn about contribution margin and go learn about operating leverage. You need to understand when you increase your fixed costs and your revenue grows to a point where the cost per customer goes up, you need to understand that scaling through that is very, very challenging and emotionally challenging and intellectually challenging. And don't think it's going to be easy, because that's what we did this year. We learned it the hard way. Hopefully you're taking this lesson and applying it without the scar. But that was the mathematical reason for our decrease in profit this year. But ultimately sets the foundation for where we need to go. And that lesson perfectly tees up number 6, which is don't try to scale through the scaling valley of death by starting other verticals. So that's the name that a couple people have used to describe the part of the business journey that we went through this year, which is the scaling valley of death, which is cost going up more than you think and having to outpace that cost growth with your revenue. Anyway, in the thick of scaling PGA in July, running paid webinars, we had this awesome idea to restart live Ship 30 cohorts. In our head, this sounded great because we used to run them live and we made more money when we ran them live. So why wouldn't we turn those back on? We did. We ended up running 2 live cohorts in July and October and generated about $150K in total revenue from both of them combined. And this was relative to the $40K a month baseline we had just selling the product asynchronously. So we made roughly $70K more in total revenue, and the amount of effort required to do so was an entire team basically having to run these cohorts again. And so as talented as our team is, and as many times as we've run this, it still takes a ton of bandwidth. And so we dramatically overestimated how much we would make and dramatically underestimated the team bandwidth, the cognitive bandwidth, and the emotional bandwidth of repeating ourselves after running 20 cohorts and then shutting it down. So in hindsight, we should have just packaged up some kind of bonus and launched the asynchronous product again rather than restart live. And so this lesson was challenging because it felt like the right thing to do. It was like, okay, margin has come down over here. Why don't we offset that over here by turning this vertical that was very profitable back on? And that would have been a significant revenue increase just 2 years ago, but it no longer moves the needle now. And the cost of spending all that extra time and bandwidth on Ship 30 when we were scaling this other vertical and it needed a ton more attention, otherwise it was going to kind of sit in this trough for too long. It was a huge cost. And so it likely cost us 3 or 4 months that we're feeling right now, where if we had just stayed heads down on the thing that we had invested a ton of extra team into growing, we probably would be on the other side of it. Now, I'm confident we're going to be on the other side of it to start the year and in February and March. But just a lesson that when you're in the middle of this scaling journey, it's going to be so tempting to go, okay, margin has come in. I need to go make up for it elsewhere. But the real answer is the only way out is through. The only way out is saying, I've invested in expanding capacity of this. This decreased margin is a signal that I must plow through this wall. And I should not try to make up for it over here. I have to go do the difficult work that allows us to operate this vertical that we've invested a lot of people and time and energy into at its max capacity. And I think we avoided that because it's challenging. We didn't know how to do it. It was going to take a lot more work than we were originally thinking. It takes a lot more risk. But if we had done that, I think we would be 3 or 4 months ahead and we would have finished the year in a much stronger way. So just a reminder to us that we had to feel that lesson. It was the wrong choice. That's what business is about. It's about making mistakes and learning from them. So hopefully if you're in the scaling phase and you're feeling the shiny object of like, I should go add this other, it's like plow through the wall, run through the wall. Otherwise, you're just going to be sitting in this trough that we sat with for like 3 or 4 months. So hopefully I can save a life there in terms of making the mistake that we made. All right, another tactical lesson here, number 7. There's no such thing as overcommunication, especially as a team grows. High level, my co-founder Cole held end of year one-on-ones with practically our whole team, which was a heroic feat. I don't know how he did that. I've always been impressed with his ability to just chew glass and storm through something, especially something as emotionally taxing as that. So extremely grateful that he did that, because it emerged, or it left us with a ton of takeaways. Number 1 being, we need to do a better job making a schedule. It sounds so simple, but our failure to recognize how many lives and schedules are affected by our scheduling decisions was a big lesson for us this year. What served us when we were in the very early stages of growing, so deciding things last minute, spinning things up just in time, just making it work, was now a significant bottleneck to the overall success of the business, because with every webinar or challenge or product drop, all of these things needed to happen. The sales team needed to know to not schedule any travel. Success team needed to know that they should expect an increase in output the week after. Partnership needs lead time to promote it. Marketing team needs time to generate ads and creative and emails. Finance team needs to put together the models. We could not just decide things and then do them a week and a half later. And we did, despite not really, we shouldn't have, but we still did. And we didn't know it was negatively affecting people because we didn't create the space for them to voice that concern often enough. So that's a simple fix. It's like you have to plan things in advance and make sure everyone's on the same page as you grow and as the number of people impacted by your scheduling decision grows. But this is far beyond just scheduling. This is a mantra that you must take to heart as you're scaling, and it's just over-communicate everything. You will get extremely bored of repeating yourself far before anyone gets bored of hearing it. You got to over-communicate your mission, your values, your standards, your expectations, your priorities, all of those things. You will think that your team has heard it 100 times, and then you'll ask them to repeat one and they won't be able to. And you'll be like, oh, okay, I didn't communicate correctly. And so just a big lesson for us on this kind of theme of scaling lessons, that you must over-communicate all the things you have going on, and we won't make that mistake. We won't make that mistake again next year. Lesson number 8, if your team cannot name the 3 current priorities, you are unfocused or you've under-communicated, because I think this ties into the previous lesson, which is I had a meeting with one of the members of my Vortex Mastermind, and I had some of his team members on with me, and they were kind of arguing back and forth and trying to, say who was right about what was the most important thing and whatever, or they were all arguing about different areas of the business. And I was like, all right, guys, pause. I want all of you to write down the 3 biggest important initiatives in the business right now. And they came back, and I had 4 of them on the call, and there were 12 different answers. Not a single one of them lined up. And I was like, look at these guys, they're unfocused. And then I realized that if I did that with my team, there was a 0% chance that they would all name the same 3 things as well. So I was guilty of it as well. And it reminded me of that fact. So this is, again, kind of a symptom of, in the early stages, the things that serve you don't serve you as you're scaling. And so doing a bunch of different things at once or in parallel when you have a very small team is okay, because each person kind of takes big ownership of an individual piece, and it's not, they can move things along in parallel because the amount of overlap between them is not that high. But when we have shared resources now across different parts of the business, and we have so many different departments that we could sink our teeth into, trying to do things in parallel just does not work unless they're completely siloed and each department has its own most important initiatives that they can all communicate. So this is just a simple way of saying it's on you as the founder, CEO, head of whatever either department or business you're running, that you need to over-communicate the priorities. And if you can't name them yourself, you cannot expect your team to. And if your team is not reminded of them time and time again, they will not remember them. So just a reminder to us of I need to be able to rattle off the 3 most important high-level initiatives. Our department heads need to be able to rattle off the 3 most important initiatives within their department. Our vertical owners need to be able to say the 3 most important things that they're working on. It can be no more than 3, as I talked about in this video, because you can't remember more than 3 things at once. So we'll see if I stick to this one. It's really easy to put something like this out there, say you can't focus on more than 3 things. I probably will still fall for it, but my goal this year is to overcommunicate a lot of things, and prioritization being a big part of that. All right, my 9th and final business lesson of the year is that business is simply cost per X and cash per X. Let me explain what that means. So there's several ways to express the overall health of a business. The 2 most common are LTGP or LTV to CAC, and then revenue over ad spend or ROAS. Both are ratios of how much money you make in total and how much money you spend. And so whether that's per customer or overall, those are 2 relative ratios. But basically every formula in business comes down to the cost to acquire something and the money you make from acquiring it. And once you recognize that, modeling out different areas of the business becomes much easier. So you can have cost per click, cash per click, cost per call, cash per call, cost per lead, cash per lead, cost per customer, cash per customer, cost per registrant, cash per registrant. Why I'm sharing this is those 2 numbers are simply the ratio at which you can scale. And so when that number is in a healthy range, you know that it's going to cost you a certain amount and you're going to generate a certain amount of profit, or a certain amount of revenue, I should say. And that leftover amount is where you can go pay your team, pay your everything else, right? And so as we've done different initiatives like running a challenge, for example, recognizing that the only 2 numbers that matter for the overall success of that challenge is the cost to get someone to buy, to attend, and the cash you make per. And each of those you can model out with several things underneath. Like, for example, if we run a call funnel, you have your cost per call and your cash per call. Cost per call is how much it costs you to put someone on the calendar, which is a function of your CPM, CTR, app conversion percent, and then the percent of people that you keep on the calendar. Those are individual things that you can tweak to drive down your cost per call. And then your cash per call is made up of show rate, close rate, cash collected percent, and price point, right? And so those 2 numbers, to improve that area of the business, you need to drive down the cost per call or increase the cash per call. And I don't know, this was just profound to me of how simple it makes things. It's like, all right, before I do any kind of bottleneck analysis, is the overall ratio of these 2 things in okay shape? If I'm evaluating a business, I want to know LTV to CAC or MER, marketing efficiency ratio, right? I want to know those 2 things. If I'm modeling a call funnel, I want to know cost per call and cash per call. If I'm modeling a webinar, I want to know cost per reg, cash per reg. And these are the only 2 numbers that matter when you're evaluating these different areas of the business, because then you go, okay, that ratio is out of whack. Do I need to drive cost down or do I need to increase cash per? Okay, I need to drive cost down. Okay, what are the elements of that? What are the standards of that based on the kind of industry norms? All right, cool. CTR is out of whack. Let's go just only focus on that for the next month and make that and keep everything else the same. And cost per will probably go down. Anyway, it's just a fun way of thinking about the business because it allows you to simplify things of like, okay, if we're going to run this initiative, how much we're going to pay per blank thing of it and how much we're going to generate per blank thing of it. And I'm getting a little loopy as we end this kind of business recap, but when you know your numbers and you know the ratio that you can hold between these 2, it just becomes so much simpler. You can find a tolerable amount where it's like, I know if I pay roughly this much, I'm going to generate roughly this much. And if I'm in the range of 3 to 5x that ratio, I'm probably in good shape. And so when you think of things this way, you'll find, at least I have, that a lot of the areas of your business are healthy at that cost per and cash per level. And rather than try to go fix bottlenecks that don't exist, you just need to scale that current ratio because yes, it might come in a little bit, but you have a lot of room. And that was just my realization is like how many of those ratios were actually in great shape and we just need to spend more to drive more through that overall system. And so if you can model out cost per and cash per, like I can, you will probably sleep better at night knowing the scalability of your business is probably more than you currently think. And that's at least where we're sitting at the end of this year. 2025 was a hell of a year on the business front. I learned a ton. We crossed the $8 million mark. Profit went down, but I learned more than I could possibly imagine. I expanded my capacity on the ability to execute challenging work. I feel so good about the team that we've built. I feel so good about the product suite that we have. I feel so good about the foundation we have going into 2026. It's going to be one hell of a year. And so hopefully you enjoyed those lessons. And that concludes the business recap part of the video. One hell of a year, one hell of a video. What's coming up in 2026? Let's finish it out on a strong note. I got 3 main goals as we go into the new year. I want to improve all of my baseline health metrics by 10 to 15%. I want to make 75 memory dividends with my friends and loved ones. And I want to hit 10 million in revenue at 40% or better margins. Those are the only 3 goals that I'm stepping into this new year with because I can keep them top of mind. It's health, life, and business. And they're going to guide my actions in a very good way. And rather than have 10 main ones like I did last year, I'm just going to have 3. And they're all measurable. They're all attainable. And if I'm sitting here at the end of next year and I've done those 3, it's a home run year. It's an absolute home run year. And I don't think I've ever had such a simple plan for a year that I have going into this one, guided by those 3 goals. So I'm not going to overcomplicate it. I got plenty of side quests that I want to do. I want to walk 100,000 steps in a day. I maybe want to run a 100-miler. I want to do some fitness challenges. I want to travel. I want to do all these things, but I'm not going to gauge the overall success of my year based on those things. I'm only going to think about these 3. On top of that, I have 3 daily non-negotiables that I will start the year focused on, likely keep throughout the entire year. And that's meditate for at least 10 to 15 minutes in the morning. I'm not really going to time it. I'm just saying meditate for at least 1 minute. And that is first thing in the morning. I find my emotional stability, my clarity, my just overall satisfaction when I meditate first thing in the morning goes way up. So that's one focus. Number 2 is train every day. So some kind of training, whether that's my lift, cardio, yoga, pickleball, basketball, whatever it is, I'm going to train every single day. And I want to stop eating by 7 p.m. And that's my current one because I evaluated all the different things I could do to kind of improve my sleep, my willpower, my mental clarity, my anything. And of all the things that I've tested, if I give myself 3 hours before bed without eating anything, I sleep so much better. I wake up the next day more refreshed. I then have more willpower the next day, which helps me build more momentum. And so I'm just sticking with those 3. Meditate, train, cut off food by 7 p.m. If I do those 3 things for 90% of the year, I know that these 3 main quests that I have will kind of take care of themselves. And so that's my approach to planning the year ahead this year. It's like, figure out the 3 main quests that I really want to sink my teeth into. Figure out 3 daily actions that will likely get me there if I do those things every day. Now, there's plenty of other things that I have to do to get to accomplishing my 3 main quests. I got to train hard. I got to write a ton. I got to lead the team. I got to plan stuff. I got to have fun. But I know that if I do those 3 things every day, meditate, train, and cut off food by 7 p.m., I will have the mental clarity and the energy to go do all the other things that I want to do. So that's what I'm thinking going into 2026. If you've watched this far in the video, I want to give a massive thank you to you for supporting me, for following along on the journey, for letting me ramble in your ear, whether you're watching this as a video, as a podcast, wherever you watch this type of thing. Just a massive, massive thank you from me for being a part of this journey. My request, if you've made it this far, is to let me know in some way, and you can do that by leaving a comment with either a big takeaway that you have or a goal you have for the upcoming year. If you leave a comment with one of your goals, I will screenshot it to you next year as a way to hold you accountable. Or just any big takeaway, any questions you have, just let me know. The people that make it this far in the video, quite frankly, I just want to be friends with. And I've learned so much from these types of end of year videos, and that's why I make them, because if you can borrow someone's expertise or an experience from an entire year, year in and year out, you can shortcut your learning from a lot of things. And so these are my favorite types of videos to watch. They're a lot of energy and planning and prep to make, So if you did watch this far, like I said, a massive thank you. And please let me know in some way. If you don't want to leave a public comment, you can shoot me a text, shoot me an email, shoot me a video, shoot me a Instagram DM, Twitter DM, whatever it is. But just let me know that you watched this far because I want to be friends. And I really value the people who are interested to learn from me on this journey. So that's it for 2025. We're heading into 2026. Excited, clear, energized. I feel a ton of momentum in my life. I hope this video has inspired you in some way. To 85-year-old me watching this in the future, it just brings me a smile to think about doing that one day. But that's why I really make these videos, is to document things so future me can learn from them. If you found it valuable, I appreciate you watching. Thanks for being a part of my 2025. Here's to 2026. Let's make it a hell of a year. Peace.